Okay, and we are back. I was just saying that our next speaker is R. Michael Anderson. He is dialing in all the way from London. Michael is a best-selling author and a global speaker, and we'll be sharing some insights today with us about his new book, Leading in the Next Normal. So without any further ado, it is over to you, R. Michael Anderson.
All right. Well, hello everybody, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm joining you from London, but believe it or not, this isn't a Manchester accent. This isn't a Scottish accent. I'm actually American, and I married a lovely British woman, so I live over here in the UK. So I just want to give you some context to that. And it's been a very, very interesting time, obviously, for leaders around this time. I don't have to tell the people on this call that, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. And I just want to give you a little bit about my background, and I want to give you as much context as I can to help you as leaders and business owners, because Simon briefed me of who's out there and some of the challenges people are going through. And I'm going to give you, actually, I just came out with a book, actually, Leading in the Next Normal, and it's an international bestseller because leaders have to deal with so many different things now than we did a year plus ago. And what it does is it talks about, both in this session and the book, talk about all the different challenges we have now dealing with this massive amount of change, how to handle virtual teams, how to get people motivated and inspired, and employee well-being. The fact is people are burnt out and such. And I just, before going into the details of that, and so as I go through this, jot down any notes, because what's going to happen is I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my background and my story. I'm going to give you the 12 principles that I laid out that help leaders through this. But then Simon and I are going to get together, and he's going to ask me your questions so that you can get your direct questions answered. Because as good as I talk about what I've seen with other leaders, I want to make sure that everybody here gets as much value as they can out of this. So who am I? So I started out actually in technology. I started out as a programmer. I then started 3 of my own companies, and I realized that after I started my own companies, that I'm smart and I'm driven, and I understand business well, but I wasn't a good leader, and I was still a good manager. But when it came to when my company started scaling, I had one main company that really scaled quickly. And then all of a sudden, I was this programmer, this technical guy, and then all of a sudden I had a bunch of people, employees, that were looking to me for more. And I really didn't get leadership at that time. What I thought leadership was I would get in a whole bunch of tasks to do in projects. I would divvy out the tasks, and if people didn't get them done as fast or as well as I thought, then I would just get angry and frustrated at them. And obviously that wasn't a good way to go through things. And the larger we got, the more my deficiencies around leaderships got exposed, and it caused problems. It caused problems in the business. It caused problems for me professionally and monetarily. It caused issues emotionally, and it caused issues mentally, because that was such a difficult time for me. And I realized that I had to make a change, because all the things that made me a good technical person, I'm a little bit, believe it or not, I'm a bit introverted. I'm good at analyzing things. I'll outwork any problem. But all of a sudden I have these people, and now what I have to do is I have to motivate and inspire them. I have to be great at communication. I need emotional intelligence. It's not just about directing people. It's about getting people on board with who I am and what the company's doing and the purpose, and really developing a culture. And I sort of understood all those things intellectually, but I didn't understand exactly how to integrate and implement that. And so I realized, and there's a longer dramatic story about this that has to do with a business partner assaulting me, punching me in my own office, divorce, substance abuse, restraining orders, lawsuits. But we don't have time for that. If you want to get all that info, you got to wait for the Netflix special for that. But seriously, if you want to hear, I tell my story on my YouTube channel and things like that. But the point is that I realized that I had to grow as a leader, not as a manager, but as a leader. And for me to reach my goals and really to do justice to my employees and my customers, I said, look, I'm going to do whatever it takes to become that type of leader. And I took courses. I read so many books. I got coaches. I took courses. But what I also did is I actually signed up and earned a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And when I talk about spiritual psychology, it's nothing to do with religion. It's psychology. We learn 8 different psychoanalysis techniques just from a very compassionate and empathetic point of view. And the funny thing is, out of everything that I learned and my coaches and my teachers and everything else, when I started applying what I learned in that master's of psychology to my businesses, so to myself and to my leadership, then that's when we really started to take off. We were on the Inc. 5. This is when I had a couple software companies in California. We were on the Inc. 5000 list a couple of years in a row of fastest growing private companies. We were voted the #1 best place to work, which I'm really proud about. And I won Social Entrepreneur of the Year. That was externally, but internally, it's like I was finally having fun as a leader because I was growing something that was worthwhile. I was watching my employees grow as people. We were delivering great value to customers, and I was giving back to my community. And it was all easy. It didn't have to be hard because before I made these changes, I was just I looked cool and like I got it together on the outside, but on the inside, I would feel like a fraud. I would constantly be doubting myself. And so I realized that there's a lot better ways to go through this. And a lot of it has to do because I have the master's in psychology. I went on to get a neuroscience certificate because I really enjoy understanding what makes me tick and what makes other people tick. And so what happened then after I made these changes there were the changes in me and the changes in my organizations. A couple people I know, business owners in California, saw the changes in me personally and my business went through. They said, "Hey, Mike, what are you doing over there? Can you help us over here with my business?" And I found out I really enjoyed coaching and teaching and training other leaders and helping other businesses. And I looked at my life and I spent 22 years in accounting software. And I'm like, hey, maybe it's time for a change. And I know what you're thinking out there. You're like, accounting and software. Are there any, and especially when you mix them, are there any two subjects that are sexier in the world, especially when you mix accounting software? And you must have been like a rock star, Mike. That's what people say. I'm like, yeah, I was a bit of a rock star in that industry, but seriously, I love my accounting software days. But I'm like, hey, maybe it's time for something different. So I sold off 2 of my companies. I still own 1 of them. And what I really do is I teach the mindset of leadership around the world. Companies like Uber, Microsoft, Salesforce, they're all companies that bring me in to level up their leaders. And I got a couple best-selling books, et cetera. So that's a little bit about me and about my background. So I do mentoring, I do a little bit of coaching, advising, I'm on some boards, and I do a lot of training. Again, not about management, but about the psychology and the mindset that leaders need to scale their business. Because really, I find that true leadership is a mind game. How do you really trust yourself? How do you have that inner resilience? How do you have that leadership presence that's authentic? Everybody talks about being authentic, but being authentic is a byproduct of really understanding and trusting yourself. So I do a lot of reflective type things and help people really bring out their best. And so, March 2020 came and all of a sudden we're in lockdown and we're going through more change. I say in the first couple months of 2020 that a lot of leaders have been through more change than they have in the last 30 years. And it's not any change that we were ready for. And what I also realized is in my work life, as a leader, first of all, I worked for a North American-based company during 9/11. So I saw what a crisis did, the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001. I saw what happened to businesses and leaders when the terrorists hit, because it was especially in North America, and I know around the world, when those terrorist attacks happened, the planes came into the towers, business just stopped. I mean, with this pandemic, I think we had a little heads up that it was coming, and then business just stopped. So a lot of leaders had to really adjust quickly. Then I went through, I briefly mentioned a really crazy business lawsuit and things with a business partner. And I learned a lot about what leaders have to do and what businesses have to do through crises. So actually, when the Great Recession hit a couple years ago, and I owned 3 software companies, I knew what to do personally, and I knew what to do for my businesses, and we actually doubled in revenue and doubled in profit in the Great Recession. So I have a bit of a toolkit for leaders when you are dealing with difficult situations. And I've been working and leading remotely for over 20 years. I actually lived in Europe when for a technology company remotely for a North American-based software company And when I had my companies, well, the one was 2/3 remote, so we were in a hybrid environment, and that's the one that won the #1 best place to work. So I know a lot of leaders here are struggling with, oh my gosh, we're on Zoom all the time, we're on these video things all the time. My people seem burnt out. I don't know how to engage them. I don't have to know how to motivate them. I'm feeling a bit down myself. If that's you as a leader, then what we're going to talk about is really relevant, and that's what I put in my book, Leading in the Next Normal. And maybe somebody on there here that's running it can also drop in the chat the book link to get the book for anybody who doesn't have it, because everything we talk about, I don't want you to worry about notes now, because everything we talk about is in the book. So I really just want everybody to be present. So again, start thinking about your questions, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my 12 principles that I share in the book. And then that's going to give you some context about what leaders need to do now. And then Simon and I will have that conversation to really get deeper into some of the things. So what I'm going to do is I am going to share my, and if you'll see there's a link for the book they put in the chat, as well as a high performance online teamed virtual team course they'll talk about at the end. And then please do connect to me on LinkedIn. It's always great to be connected to other leaders. And I am going to share my thing. And if you can see that, the whiteboard okay. Well, it looks like I can't see the whiteboard okay. All right, let me just try to share the whole screen here. Zoom, don't fail me now, right? Meeting controls. Stop share. Give this another shot. Let's do it this way. All right. All right, just checking. Can you see the infographic? Yes, we can. All right, great. Now, excellent, everybody. Thank you. So, and here I'm just going to talk through this infographic a little bit. It's just nice sometimes for me to. I'm a visual learner, so it's nice just to follow along with those things. Now, when it comes to where we are at as leaders in organizations, principle one is you can't sprint a marathon. And the reason I put this out here is I believe we went through 3 different phases in this through the pandemic. The first couple of weeks, I say, was like a street fight. As business owners, all of a sudden we're quarantined, we're working from home. It's like, business might be down. Nobody's really doing any business. Maybe you had to do layoffs or furloughs. And I say that was like a street fight. It was like a street fight because for 2, 3, 4 weeks, you as a business leader had to make massive decisions around cash flow, around people, around offices, et cetera, with very limited information. And probably you've never dealt with anything like that before. And you really had to make some quick, hard strikes quickly just to stay alive, just like in a street fight. So that was the first couple of weeks. And then it's like, okay, we got through that. We know we're going to survive, right? We know we're going to still be in business. And we had to make some of these difficult things. And make no mistake, that was difficult on so many leaders. I've had, I worked with a lot of leaders that I advise, and they're like, look, I've had to lay off 75% of my people. This has been the hardest last 48 hours of my life. So if you went through a difficult time, then you're not alone. That was crazy. And then the next phase was sort of like a sprint, because it's like, hey, now we figured out what we have to do to pivot. Hey, maybe we're working from home. We do calls this way. We're going to maybe change our product offering. And everybody did the pivot, smart pivots. But the thing is, when you pivot, it takes a lot of energy, and it's like a sprint. And remember, back in March 2020, we thought this was going to be over in June or July. We thought it was going to be over by summer. So we got our teams to sprint. And the thing is, teams were sprinting, but they were sprinting based on fear, because a lot of employees, they were scared about their job, they were scared about their company, they were scared about the industry, whether they would keep their job. There's all this crazy news. A lot of people, maybe they got COVID, or maybe one of their relatives got COVID. So there was just a lot of people were working a lot and really truly sprinting, using a lot of energy. But what happened is the pandemic went past July, right? We're really still in it in a lot of ways, and people are still sprinting. The problem is, when you sprint a marathon, you get really exhausted. And my team and I did a really in-depth study of the workforce at the end of last year, and people are exhausted. And I'll tell you, people are on a precipice of burnout, and this is worldwide. And I talked to Simon, checked in, and this is your industry too. And so that's principle one. We got to treat this like a marathon now. And so that means simplifying. That means taking care of our people. We'll go into that in a couple minutes. Principle two, leadership is personal now, and care about the person and their care. They will care about their job. And what that means is you as a leader, you got to bring out your best right now, because people need you. Your staff needs you. And it's very difficult because we're under more pressure than ever, but we also need to spend more time being leaders. And so I tell leaders, if you're used to spending 10 to 20 hours a week leading, working with your team, doing meetings with them, checking in, doing one-on-ones, you need to double that, because they need you. They need to see you're there. They need to have hope in you. They need to get more direction, especially through all these changes. You need to take care of your people. When I talk about leadership as personal now, I talk about there used to be a bit of a separation between boss and the employees' home lives. But now that people are working out of their homes, right, you really need to know their personal situations. I worked with one leader, and she was a country manager for Germany. And what happened is she had a 10-month-old baby at home, and her husband worked in oil and gas. And so he was in the apartment for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks he was out of the apartment. So this lady is trying to run a major country for this training thing. And 2 weeks out of every 4 weeks, she has to deal with a 10-month-old baby. And I'm like, how are you doing? She said, I have no idea. And so if her boss didn't know that, he's failing her or she's failing her, right? Because your boss, you as a boss need to know what people's home life is like if they are forced to work from home. And people's family will get COVID. Like a lot of people take care of elderly relatives, and if them or somebody from their family gets, they have to be a caretaker for them, or they get COVID themselves or whatever. You really have to know that. And the thing is, and that's what I mean about principle theory: care about the person and care about their job. This is the time where they need your empathy. They need you to care about them as people. And if you want to gain loyalty, you want to gain the respect of your people for a long term, then you really got to make this extra effort to really get to know them, what's going on, to really show them that care, because that's going to get them on your side. And it's not just them. When other people in your organization are seeing that you're going to this next level, that's where they're going to really respond. Principle 4, earn the right to have real conversations, and you don't find out about mental health issues until it's too late. I told you people are struggling. 3 out of every 4 executives, directors, and managers, 3 out of every 4 are having mental health issues, and 1 out of every 4 it's serious. And so that means if you have an 8-person management team, 6 out of 8 of them are struggling, and 2 out of 8 of them are in a really difficult position. And so many leaders right now tell me, like, hey, I know I know my team's not doing well. I can feel it. I just when I ask them how they're doing, they're like, oh yeah, hey, it's okay. It's everything's fine. Everything's fine. So their intuition is telling them that their team needs help, but they don't know really how to get that information out of them and address them. And that's what I go through the book, and that's what I go through in the course. So if you're a leader there and you're like, hey, I know everything isn't right with my people. I know I should be making moves. I just don't know what they are. And I'm really feeling that this is going to get worse and worse unless I do something. Then look at the book and look at the course, which we'll talk about at the end. Because if somebody reaches burnout, I believe you failed them as a leader. Because if somebody reaches burnout, I mean, so many people I talk to are medicating themselves, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, whether people are having problems getting any sleep. People are on sleep pills for the first time in their life. They're on anti-anxiety medication, food, everything else that they're using to manage this stress, which is not a great long-term solution, obviously. And when people do hit burnout, do hit this nervous breakdown, do all of a sudden call you up and say, hey, I'm in the hospital, or I need a couple weeks off. It takes weeks or months to get past pure burnout from your employees. And then look what happens to the rest of your team. Then they have to pick up the slack from them, and they know somebody else just burnt out, and they're like, well, what am I doing working here? What am I really doing? If people from the team are burning out, they're dropping off, I have to take up their workload, and the company really doesn't care about my well-being. I don't really know if this is the right place for me. I'm going to go to somewhere where it takes care of me. And Microsoft just put out a survey that said 41% of people are really struggling right now, and are looking for a new job because they're not sure that they're where they're working now is a great long-term place. So we really need to step up as leaders. Run tight meetings, period. Like I could talk for hours about virtual meetings, but I want to focus more on, because so much of our life revolves around virtual meetings. I want to keep going through these principles, and if it comes up with questions with Simon, we will. I just want to respect everybody's time. Same with empowered accountability leads to a strong culture. There's so much about accountability. There's so much about culture when leading remotely that you need to put into your organization. If you feel that the culture is slipping, if you feel people aren't motivated, you really need to, there's a lot of best practices that maybe you haven't been exposed to that you really need to be employing now to get your team back engaged, back accountable. Because everybody wants to do a good job. So if somebody is slipping, it's your job as a leader. So many people come to me and they're like, oh, my meetings are flat. And they're almost like saying that it's their employee's fault. If you're running the meeting, it's up to you to run a great meeting. And there's a lot of tools and techniques to do that. And if somebody is slipping in their performance or their motivation, that is your responsibility. That's not their responsibility. If you're the leader, that's your responsibility. So you really have to make sure you're upskilling yourself. You have the tools and you have the skills to serve your people and be that type of leaders. One of the things you can do, and this is a real simple one, is what happens is when people are used to being in an office or seeing their people face to face, and all of a sudden they're doing virtual or remote work, the managers are saying to me like, I just don't know what they're doing all day. I'm sure they're busy because I get emails all different times, but I want to know what they're doing every day. And they don't ever say this to your employee. Hey, every day when you're done, I want you to send a list of everything you did yesterday, because these managers, they really want to control everything. And because you're not in the office, it's like, oh, I don't know what they're doing. And it's like, you have this thing like, are they working? Are they working hard? Are they just sitting at home on the sofa watching Netflix? Are they slacking off? That type of micromanagement is really going to turn people off, and really that's the exact opposite thing you want to do. A lot of people know that management and leadership is about empowering people and having them reach goals. Now, what you want to do, and this is up for you, up to bring you to level yourself up as a manager and leader, or to really get clear about what you expect out of people as far as outcomes and results, and make sure they're clear in that, and then have them go do that, empower them and trust them to do that. If they get that done in 6 hours a day, who cares? What do you really care? But chances are they're not. Chances are actually the statistics show people are working more now, because there's not that separation between work and the office and things. And when you start getting like nosy and not trusting them, what did you do yesterday? And can you send me a list of everything you did? They're like, well, I just worked 10 hours for you. I really don't want to make a list. I really don't like that. And so you have to realize that it's up to you to empower them. That doesn't mean you don't have check-ins. That doesn't mean you don't have rules and boundaries and things. But I just really want you to reflect on your behavior around that. Because on principle number 10 and principle number 11, there's so much negativity out there. People are struggling. People are locked down. I heard in South Africa, I think you guys even had alcohol restrictions where you couldn't even buy alcohol. And, anyway, people are just really struggling with how to get through that. And a lot of people are using work, and this is a great way you can be of service to, and I talk of being of service because I really believe great leaders are of service. That's why we talk about servant leadership, are in service to both their customers and their employees, and really there to make sure that the way I think of it is I'm there to make sure my employees have everything that they can do to serve the customer. And I had one boss, and I always remember this because but at the end of the day, your employees are the one nose to nose with the customer, not necessarily you, especially in a larger organization. And if they're nose to nose with the customer, it's my job to make sure that they have all the training and be empowered and have everything that they need to do an amazing job. And he said to me, he goes, and I'll never forget this, Mike, I just make sure my employees are empowered and engaged, and then they worry about the customer. I don't even worry about the customer. I just worry about my employees. I'm like, man, that's always stuck with me. But back to all this craziness, the fact is we got to deal with so much negativity and people out there about the news, about vaccines, about this, about that. They're using work can really be a way to bring some positivity into people's lives because there's a sense of meaning and a purpose. And if you show up and you start to show up with that negative energy and you start to doubt yourself and you start to doubt your if you are going through a low point, because I'll tell you, for me and everybody else, it's been more a roller coaster, and that's okay. You're human. You're going to go through that. But if you're on the down, if you're feeling a little bit depressed, don't address your team. Reschedule things, because the one time you show up and you don't believe in your company or yourself, they're going to sense that energy and they're going to lose hope and lose faith. Just think about it. If one of your leaders, whether it's through a company or it's through a politician, the one time that they show up and they're like, oh, this is tough, I don't know how we're going to get through this, everybody pounces on them. And it's almost not fair, because as a leader, I'm not saying don't be authentic. You got to be authentic and you got to be honest, but you got to be like, hey, look, we're going to get through this. We're going to be strong. Here's what we're going to do. You want to be absolutely authentic and truthful about where you're at now. But then you're like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make it. We're going to get together. They just want to know that there's hope. And so you've always got to bring that positive type hope, because, at the end of the day, your culture, your agility, and your people are your long-term competitive advantages. We used to think it was intellectual property or market share. Well, what this pandemic, the last 12, 13 months have shown us, it's your people and it's your culture, because the people that are winning now are the people that could quickly adapt to that. So, all right. Whew, I feel like I've been talking and talking and talking. Son, are you there? We're going to do a little back and forth, I believe. Is that accurate?